Welcome to Lovely Esteem. I'm Lovely, the auntie you always wanted, the sister girlfriend you didn't know you needed, honey. You got to have self-love to have self-esteem. And here we know that God don't make no junk. So we're going to sit down, talk about it, and see how we can fix it, baby. Let's do it. But my name is Lee. My mental health journey kind of started, I want to say it started probably 20 years ago. And one of the biggest things that I learned is that I heal better through conversation than I do through medicine. It's just one of the ways that has helped me out. And I've gone through depression, I've gone through postpartum, all the things that mommies go through.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I want to start speaking with people because we have mothers of all walks of life now. And we have dads of all walks of life now. And I wanted to start talking to people to really have we wanted to record conversations of us trying to help each other heal, understand the differences in background, and understand that even though you feel like there's a difference in background, there's really no difference in background. It just looks a little bit different. Like, your skin looks a little different. Where you grew up look a little different, but a lot of us have the same flaws. A lot of us have the same pains, and we have the same celebrations. So I said, if I can get some wonderful people to come on and talk about that, I feel like it would touch so many people. So I thank you so much for coming on here and talking to me about this.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I love that mission. I'm a big believer that healing happens best in community. And this is just another form of community. So thank you for letting me serve your community and be a part of it today.
Thank you. So initially, I was going to do this whole, we're going to introduce Miss Courtney Boyer, but I really want you to introduce yourself and tell us about you and what you're doing right now.
Sure. So I am my name's Courtney Boyer, and I am a relationship and sexuality expert. I'm a trained mental health and sex therapist and life coach. And I'm the author of Not Tonight, Honey, Why Women Actually Don't Want Sex and What We Can Do About It. And I am passionate about elevating the conversation around women's sexuality, especially around the issues of desire and pleasure, because I believe that a pleasured woman is a powerful woman, and powerful women can change the world.
And I love that. When I read that, I said, ooh, this is going to be a good conversation.
Yes.
Just because I think sometimes we get so stuck on the physical attributes that we all have. That's what the world tells us, the size you need to be, in order to be desirable. And once you're that size, what happens when you still don't feel desirable? Because you have to really work on your inner self. Because I tell people all the time, you see people who lose 100 pounds and they still feel the same way. It's because you have to do that inner work first before 100%. Anything's going to come out on the outside. And I was like, I just love this. And the talk around intimacy, I think a lot of the times it's always attached to the sexual act versus what happens way before you get anywhere near a bedroom.
Absolutely.
And I think that a lot of even women get stuck in the word intimacy, and it has such a, especially nowadays, starting to have like a negative connotation when you say intimacy versus understanding that there's so much connectiveness that you need in order to have that, especially with all of the different sexualities that we're starting to discover a little bit more. We're starting to understand asexual, where they stand, non-binary, and understanding the relationship between intimacy and even your best friend. It's not just your husband. It can be your best friend or your mom, those integral relationships that we have. So I wanted to really ask you, one of my biggest questions is, how did you get into this field?
Yeah. So I grew up in a really conservative Christian home and Christian school, and we just never talked about sex ever. And it was, I grew up in like kind of two different worlds. So I would play with in a lot of like club soccer and club basketball teams. And a lot of those kids went to public school. And then I went to a small private Christian school. And I just was so fascinated by like their dating and the way that they like dressed, because it was just very sheltered where I grew up.
Okay.
And then I went to a Christian college and really started to like meet all kinds of people. You didn't have to be a Christian to go there. And so I started to meet individuals who didn't share the same faith as me, or who did, but saw the world differently. And that really opened my eyes and really drew me into like how we as the church talk about sexuality. And so I told my parents, I don't want to study law. I actually want to study sex. I mean, what parent doesn't want to hear that? And so then I really wanted to be a part of the solution and not perpetuate the problem. So I went to graduate school and got a master's in education in human sexuality. And I worked as a sexuality educator for a little bit. And then I would have people come up to me and ask me questions like, is this normal? Or am I broken? Like what's wrong with me? And I couldn't answer them with integrity because I just wasn't trained. So I went back and got another master's, this time in mental health counseling, and then opened up a mental health and sex therapy practice and just kind of evolved from there.
So many questions. So this honestly, so many questions. And it's very interesting because I went to Catholic school.
Okay.
So I understand.
Mm-hmm.
I understand. There was so much. And I used to say to my husband and I, we have been together since we were 13 and 14.
Oh,
We
wow.
left 8th grade and have been together since.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
But also you think about what problems we encountered because we were young.
Yep.
We both came from broken homes and sex wasn't the topic. Survival was the topic.
Yeah.
Yep. So we came from a space where when you're 13, you don't know anything. You think you're in love. I'm so in love with him, Mom. You just don't understand me. You're trying to break our hearts. But having that faith behind you and getting to a space where, okay, so now we're going to get married. Now what do we, how does sex relate to that? If you were told to keep your mouth shut, your legs shut, and then right after you get married, you're supposed to turn into like this sexy diva.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You're like, there's some steps missing.
Yep. Lots of steps missing. Yep.
And I feel like maybe you guys should have said a little bit more.
Yeah.
Just a little bit more. So can you give us some examples of some of the questions that you receive regarding intimacy in the fear specter of it? Like I guess when people are trying to understand what intimacy is, how do they usually go about that? What questions do they usually ask you?
Yeah. Well, I think so a lot of times people will use the word intimacy as a replacement for sex. So I know I've had conversations, especially with older people. I remember having a conversation with my grandma like 15 years ago or whatever. And she was like, but have they been intimate? And I was like, are you asking if they've had sex? Like, I don't like, what are we talking about here, Grams? And so I think it's important that they're two very different things. You can have intimacy without sex and you can have sex without intimacy. Yeah. And so for me, differentiating that's really important. So like I define intimacy as an emotional vulnerability. So being able to be open and vulnerable with an individual, regardless, like you said before, it could be a friend, it could be a parent, it could be a lover, but it's opening yourself up and sharing a part of yourself that feels weak and vulnerable, and not weak in a like physical sense, but weak as a like, this could be used against me, or I may not feel safe to share this with everybody, that type of thing. So what was your question about that? I'm sorry.
No, you answered it.
Okay.
No, you totally answered it.
Okay.
Because I think one of the ways that I have conversations with people is that I want us to learn how to articulate our feelings. I feel like sometimes when you get frustrated, you may say, F this, or I don't have time for that, when that's not what you mean. If the prime example, have they been intimate? Do you mean, have they had sex? Right. That's two different things because like, as you said, so I think that when we are trying to define what we're trying to say to our partners or expressing our feelings, having the words to really articulate what you feel exactly what you're trying to say, because sometimes when you say, I want to have intimacy with you, it could be that you want to sit down and read together. I want us to read this book together so that we can connect and feel, united on this particular front.
Right.
But I think that when the word intimate comes up, it's like sex, and you're like, no.
Right.
No, because I want to be intimate with my best friend, but that's not the same. We're not having that same conversation. So that's why I asked about intimacy and your idea, because I feel like I'm 47 and learning through trial what intimacy looks like, and how it, depending on your culture, sometimes your religious background, the traditions that you have, when you hear the word intimacy, it like turns people off, because they're like, you just want to have sex. And I think that even on the scale for men, and the conversations I have with men, when they hear intimate, they automatically think they have to like show up fully ready. And it's like, no, you can lay in my lap. I want to rub your head and tell you about my day, and you tell me about yours.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many different elements that you can combine to create an intimate moment. I mean, I've had intimate moments with strangers just from like shared experiences, without even touching them or even conversing with them, just being in the same space and witnessing something together, like that was incredibly vulnerable. And so intimate can be such a spectrum of things.
Yes. And when you are, what are your top 5 tips for establishing intimacy within any relationship?
Yeah. So I would say the first one is identify the level of intimacy you're wanting to have, or kind of like a gauge. So for I know I have some friends that I'm like, I'm comfortable going to like this level with them in terms of things that I want to share. But then there's some people that I'm like, I'm ready to go like really deep. So I think just being aware of like what your comfort zone is in terms of that intimacy is really helpful beforehand, and giving yourself permission, because that may change either or. So you have the right to change your mind. So you may have been super intimate with someone, and then you're like, they're not a trustworthy person. Like they didn't honor me with like their time or their responses or whatever. And so I'm going to go ahead and revoke some of that intimacy. And that's okay. Or vice versa. You may find someone that you were more hesitant to invest in. And then you're like, man, like, okay, like we can be a little bit more intimate with each other. So I'd say first is, gauging that. The second is being aware of that equal energetic exchange. So on those same lines of, I want to be this intimate with someone, do they want to be that intimate with me? Because if you have an unequal exchange in terms of that energy, long-term, it can become problematic. Like a short-term interaction, sure, that's fine. But if you are consistently showing up and you are really trying to be like, hey, like, I want to tell you about things, I want to connect with you in this way. And they're like, that day was cool. Yeah. I talked to my mom, I talked to her yesterday. It was good. You're like, I just poured my heart out to you. Like, I can't have that intimate relationship with you if you're not meeting me halfway. So again, being aware of the exchange that's happening on both accounts and making sure that it's in alignment. I think that a third tip could be being willing to step outside your comfort zone. I think a lot of times with intimacy, especially if you have a history of being hurt, or you have trauma in your past, or it just being vulnerable with people in general has been really hard, you're not going to grow as an individual if you continue to show up the same way. So trying to just move just a little bit, like push yourself just a little bit to be like, okay, I'm going to be a little bit more, I'm going to open up just a little bit more with this one person that I feel really safe with. Because that's how we grow as people. So that would be my third piece of advice. My fourth one would be like, have fun with it. Like, so a lot of times we take intimate relationships, like, I mean, it is like, it can be big, heavy stuff, but it can also be really fun. It can be exciting and like joyful. It can be a lot of amazing things. So trying to remember that it doesn't always have to be like, okay, we're going to talk about all of our unresolved childhood traumas together and we're going to love it and it's going to be great. Like maybe that's not going to be fun all the time. So giving yourselves permission to let's I went to here in Germany, because that's where I live. Saunas are really popular and they're nude. Like you just go in and you take off your clothes and you walk around naked and you go to these different saunas. And as an American who grew up in the States, that's very uncommon and most people don't do that. And that felt so intimate to me to go with a group of my girlfriends to do that, like to have them see me naked and just be like, okay, right. But then we just had so much fun when we got over ourselves. And so like, that's a great example of you can have an intimate experience that, yeah, it is a big deal, right? To expose your body to somebody else. But it was really fun. We laughed so much and now I'm like, okay, what's the big deal? Like, who cares? Let's see, a fifth topic about intimacy. Gosh, this one is kind of like the bummer side of it, but like be aware that sometimes you're going to get your heart broken. I think that is something that we forget. Like, yes, intimacy is so rewarding and so lovely and gosh, it's fantastic, but man, sometimes you get your heart broken. Like sometimes you do all the right things and you show up and you invest in a person that really is, and then life happens and sometimes you get hurt. And I think people think that they did something wrong or that they're being punished when they get hurt. And I think we forget that that's just part of the human experience.
I love all of those. One, you are so right about the sauna. That's even if you go on vacation together and you've never put on a bathing suit in front of your friends.
Yes.
It's just exposing people to the sides of you because you're mirroring your own insecurities anyway, because they're thinking about themselves.
Of course. Yeah.
They're like, okay, you look fine, but like, did you see me?
Like, oh yeah.
Yeah. And I love the last one, honestly, because I think that a lot of people think that the failure in your relationship means that you did something wrong, and it usually lessons. It teaches you boundaries. It teaches you, how to show up better in your next set of relationships. And sometimes it warns you. Your intuition usually tells you like, this isn't a good space for you, but if we're going to do this, this may not work and you feel it sometimes, but you want to give your all.
Yes.
You're like, but I like this person.
They're so great. Yeah.
They're so fun. They're so fun. Like, well, why do you cry when you leave them? I don't know. I just feel so emotional. You come up with all these excuses on how to make it work. But I think that when you spoke about just really being able to show up for someone and have them see you as present as possible, because sometimes you think that you're present, but you're masking, and you don't know that you're masking until they ask you a trigger question and you're like, no, we don't go there. we never cross that street. And and it's like, that's that time when you're like, okay, do I trust you enough to talk to you about this? And honestly, you should still have discernment, because sometimes you know going in, maybe this crowd isn't going to be the crowd that it's accepting of your softer side or the vulnerable side of you. Or maybe when this topic happens, you get ugly and they've never seen you ugly before. And having somebody pull you to the side and say, hey, I see you. Is there something we can do to help you? So I think a follow-up question would be, if you're trying to have an intimate relationship with someone, like, what are some of the steps that you can take to make them feel safe, or to work on yourself so they feel safe?
Yeah, I think, so I'm always a big fan of modeling. So like being that example. So showing people that it's okay to put yourself out there, to be vulnerable, to want that intimate relationship. that is really scary to like make that first step, especially if you've been hurt in the past. And so if you're wanting to have an intimate relationship with someone, I'm a big fan of communicating that, of just flat out being like, hey, like I'm like, we'll say it for a romantic relationship, you know, like I'm like really into you. I think you're like awesome. And I'd really like to get to know you, or I'd really like to share something with you. Would that be okay? And I love asking that question because it gives them the permission to decide. Because when you say somebody says that to you, it's not like flippant information typically follows. It's usually information, right, that matters or is like powerful or, you know, like vulnerable. And so when you say that to someone, you're giving them that permission to receive you or not. But you need to be prepared for their answer. They may say, actually, no, like I'm not ready for that. Okay, like, whoa, I got to take a step back. But at least you know right off the bat, right? At least you know, like, okay, like he ain't playing. Like I'm fully aware that like this isn't something that he's ready to go or she's not ready to engage in, and then proceed accordingly. But a lot of times when like people appreciate that honesty and directness, and then we're like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna receive that and kind of see how that goes, and then they're evaluating what you're sharing and the purpose of what you're sharing too. I think that's a big thing. A lot of times when we share, we're doing it because we want external validation or because we want to impress somebody or because we want to look, you know, whatever. But if we're really sharing it to be intimate, to be vulnerable with somebody, like people pick up on that. And then they say, okay, like I see what this girl's about. Like, okay, like, yeah, let's do this or not, you know?
She's like, or not.
Or not, or not. Or not. Sorry.
Because it's wonderful. I've lived I always say to my husband, I'm at a space in my life where I'm happy, I'm thriving. And it took a long time to get to that, to understand what thriving looks like if you're just used to like making it. Yep. But I think that in my thriving era, I attract people who want to tell me their story. Like we ride motorcycles a lot and we'll just stop in like somewhere where you're like, where did this store come from? Like, why did this store just show up? And we'll be standing there and somebody will come up and they'll ask about the motorcycle. And by the time we're done, I know about grandkids or, you know, and I'm like, I used to be like, am I just standing there with like a sign over my head that says, tell me everything? But what I learned was when you're comfortable with yourself, the energy that you send off, it looks inviting. You know, you're not, I mean, I have RBF, but I think I have RBF, resting bitch face, because you grew up in the States, you learn how to walk the streets like that. You learn how to protect yourself. But when you're in your safe spaces, who knows? I'm sure that my mouth is kind of partially open and I'm thinking about something. Like that's just what I do. So and that to me, I've learned to accept the intimate parts of strangers. Like there are people who come into your life, they tell you something and you don't know why they told you. You're not 100% sure what that's about, but you're like, okay. And then later on, something will come up and you're like, I had a conversation with somebody about that.
Right.
You know, and I think that sometimes when we, again, like I said, when we talk about intimacy, we always make the assumption that it's this deep relationship that we've invested years in. And sometimes it happens to be the lady at the market who's going through something at the moment. And they feel like, oh, you look trustworthy enough for me to ask you this question.
Absolutely.
You know, and I love that. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your book because I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of anybody who I love seeing people win and challenge themselves. Because I think it's the idea. It's like, I'm going to start a podcast. That was 2.5 years ago. Getting to a place where you feel comfortable enough to talk to strangers and get there, being comfortable enough to sit down and do the research to write a book. and to edit a book and then to have people give you feedback that may not make you feel comfortable.
That one's true. Yep.
And still say, yeah, I'm still going to do it.
Yeah.
Like, we deserve to celebrate that. So please talk about your book some more.
Yeah, that's so, I remember I hired a book coach because I really wanted to do this, like the not the right way, but for me, like the right way, the whole process. And that was a concern that kind of like people are going to read, like they're going to read this. And she's like, yep, that's the point of it. I'm like, well, what if they don't like what it says? And I remember thinking like, why did I write this? Like I had to go back to my why. And this is what I tell my clients too. Like, why did you hire me? Why are we doing this? Why are you on this journey? And I kept going back to so many conversations of women coming to me either, one-on-one or after I was speaking to a group, and they would just the look on their face and just the tears in their eyes of like, what is wrong with me? Like, why don't I want sex? Like, am I broken? Like, my husband thinks that there's something wrong with me. And I just like, that was what fueled me to write the book. And that's really what kept me motivated when I wanted to give up and throw it into a fire and just watch it burn, because I was so like, I can't do this. This is too much. And I kept thinking about those women. And I honestly kept thinking about women of like my mom's age and my grandma's age who didn't have the opportunity to be vocal as a female in society. And like, I would just like close my eyes sometimes. I don't think I've ever shared this before. And I would just imagine like women from before me, just like standing like around me, just being like, write it, like speak for us, speak because we couldn't. And I just was like, okay, so I wrote a book on why women actually don't want sex, because so often women think that it's because they're tired or, they're tired, and they're not in the mood. They're not sexual anymore. They don't desire it. It's another thing to do. And I wanted them to realize that it's so much deeper than that. And that, sure, yes, like your physical and emotional states play a role, your sleep, you're out, tired of people touching you, maybe you never see your partner. Those are all normal things, but it just really is so much deeper than that. And especially, religious shame and sexual shame and those things are major contributors. And I really wanted to help women and men, anybody really realize like how pervasive the damage of cultural messaging and for so long has been towards women and our bodies, and give them an opportunity to really understand how their bodies work and give them permission for pleasure and not just sexual pleasure, just to go after the things like to start a podcast, to write a book, to just sit and smell the coffee that just lights them up. Like, it doesn't have to be permission for sexual pleasure. I mean, obviously that's a part of it, but so that's really what this book is about, and really helping women to start on that journey of sexual healing.
Let me pause.
Okay.
I thought that I scheduled us for longer than an hour, but I did not.
Okay.
Schedule us longer than an hour. So okay. I'm asking your permission to schedule an additional bit of time.
That's today. Fine. Yeah.
Okay. Because I didn't want to schedule anything without you knowing it. I'm really big on permission. Like, that's a huge thing for me.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Especially in our space, just the things that we have to deal with. And I just want to make sure that I'm giving you what you need. But I want to schedule it. I want to really talk about you touched me so much when you talked about our ancestry and how they sometimes push on us this ideal that we're supposed to know, because they weren't told. Nobody ever told them. They didn't explain to them what this. They just said, you're going to get married, and once you're married, you have to make sure that your partner is satisfied, and you have to do whatever it takes to make sure they're satisfied so that you can survive. And we're no longer in that world anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, and I love my husband. He's a wonderful man. But if he came in here and started acting crazy, I'd be like, you, sir, you might want to find your mom, because you finally lost your mind. I just, and us being together so long, we have just a rapport like that. But I think that our moms, our great grandmothers, they would have never dreamt that you could write a book like this and still be able to have a job, or or be married, or have children, or have someone who understands that. So I really want to elaborate on that, because I know so many people who are stuck in their subconscious, is stuck with what their grandmother said, what their aunties said, with you're not acting like a woman, you're not godly, you're out here in this world, you're doing the wrong thing. You're never going to get a man if you dress like this. You're never going to get a man if you think like this. And it prohibits them from moving forward, because they think that something's wrong with them, because they have to, like, your world is written, and you have to live your journey. And when you start living other people's journeys, it prevents you from being your authentic self. And I think that's sometimes where that unhappiness comes from, because you're like, this isn't the life that I saw for myself.
Absolutely. Yeah. I totally believe that the desires that you have, and I don't just mean sexual desires, I mean just desires in general, like they are for you for a reason. And when we bury them, when we suppress them, when we like try to ignore them, like the universe, God, it finds a way to like remind us that those desires were meant for us. And that is why I think so many people aren't happy, is because they feel like, just what you were saying, this is my prescripted role. This is what's expected of me. I'm supposed to do these things. And yet there's this inkling, there's this like, just like pilot light of desire that's like wants to become this huge flame, but it's so scary and it can feel really overwhelming. And so they just keep it hidden, because that feels safer.
Yes. I always say, Lisa, we're not gonna jump off and start swimming into the river of questions, just because, like I always say, the reason why I love healing through conversation is because sometimes it's like a moment that changes your life. Like, sometimes we listen to, I'm not sure if you're like me, I have a small bit of perfectionism in me, a little bit, little bit. And I tend to run my world very particular. But it's for me, but I let everybody else I'm like, you can run amok all you want. I am the person that in the middle of a party, you look for me, I'm in the corner reading a book, because my brain said, we're done now. We're done. Like, we're done. But I love, like, when I'm listening to lectures or when I'm listening to motivational speakers, I could listen to you for 2 hours, but it's like a 15-minute moment where it just captures you. And you get stuck there. And I love the fact that you are articulating the thoughts and feelings of not just yourself, but the women who came before us, who did not have a chance to, or they only were allowed to speak to each other. And they still had to like code for each other. They couldn't really say what they wanted to say. Especially depending on where you were. And if you trusted the person who you were speaking to, you knew, I can't have this go back to my husband, or I can't have this go back to my wife. And that by itself, I think, brings so much freedom to not only you for writing a book like this, but I've learned that my mother, she had me when she was 18. The more healing I have within my spirit, the more she heals. So I'll just talk about healing and what I'm going through, the classes I'm taking, courses I'm going through, certifications. And she'll say, well, what was that about? I'll explain it. And then she'll tell me a story about her life that I've never heard. And I think that that's what your book will do. It's the moments when you drop a seed and then you walk away and then you look back and the tree starts growing and you're like, oh, okay, so you want to talk about this. And they're like,
Mhm.
well, how can I talk about this in private? Because I don't feel comfortable
Yeah.
talking about it outside. So that's why I really was so interested in you talking about your book, because I think that when people hear, about not wanting to have sex, it's like, before we even get to this point,
Mm.
I need you to understand all the underlining
Right.
issues that I've gone through,
Yeah.
where once my endorphins are gone and I'm over the twittipated stage, and now I can smell your body odor, and now I can hear you chewing.
Gosh, the chewing. Yeah.
you know Now we're at a place where I get to see you.
Mm.
And because in marriage, like, you get to see the darkest sides of each other, because you're there
Mhm.
every day. It's like you
Yep.
can mask for a couple of months. You're
Mhm.
like, I always look like this when I wake up. Yes, I smell like strawberries. But,
You're welcome.
but on month 4,
Yeah.
it's not going to be that way.
No.
And being able to be open, or even having conversations that allow you to be yourself so much earlier on in any
Yeah.
platonic or romantic relationship. Just it gives me feels, and I don't like feels. I'm just gonna let you know. I do
Okay.
like
That's
them,
okay.
but I don't like. Hey guys, this is Lovely with Lovely Esteem, and today's podcast is brought to you by darling Nikki the artist. She is a local Maryland artist that focuses on tapestry, oil paintings, acrylic paintings, industrial sewing, jewelry. She's just a savant of art. And if you want anything made, she probably can do it. And if she can't do it, she'll figure it out. So I thank her so much. Thank you, darling Nikki the artist, for such a wonderful sponsorship. Bye. Let's continue the conversation. Yes, but that was that. I really enjoyed that, and I do. Again, I want to thank you so much
Oh,
for
you're welcome. Thank
being a
you.
part of this, because
Thank you.
I think that when I I'm such a stickler on learning while I'm listening.
Mhm.
And so sometimes if it seems like I've just blanked out, it's not. It's because
Okay.
you whenever you go to when you go to classes to learn how to, speaking classes, speech,
Mhm.
they tell you, you need to make sure that the person knows that you're speaking. And I'm like, sometimes I watch your mouth and I get caught, and I'm like, stop moving your head. Okay.
Oh, that's great.
Yes, but I'm very interested. But again, I would like us to talk a little bit more about just the culture around intimacy and
Mhm.
religion, and how that
Yeah.
affects so many, and it has affected so many
Yeah.
different generations, and how it's passed down.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot of fear around intimacy. I think that we have been really conditioned, especially growing up in religion, that to not trust ourselves, but to only trust authority, and like authority within, especially the church. And so I think that sets it up. And you can't really have a very intimate relationship with someone who's like your pastor or your deacon or whatnot. I mean, there's this level of divide that exists for, a variety of reasons. And so then it's hard to understand what intimacy is within like that, like a body. So like the church in general, other than like sort of superficial friendships. So like, I don't ever remember having like really in-depth conversations with people until I probably got to college. I mean, like bare your soul, talk about like, I'm really struggling with my mental health. I'm really struggling with my life. I'm really struggling with my partner. Like it was so, you were expected to be perfect. You were expected to show up like, I love Jesus and Jesus makes everything better. And so therefore my life is perfect. Okay. Like I can never be sad and I can never be doubtful. And I love the Lord and I love life. Amen. The end. And it's like, okay, but what about the rest of us who are like really struggling and that's not our experience, but we still love Jesus? Like, am I doing something wrong? And so just that the internalized shame of, I'm expected to be this, I'm not this, what's wrong with me because I'm not this, but I can't talk about not being like this because everybody else is supposed to be like this, and it just is this like vicious cycle until somebody finally just says, I'm not okay. I'm really struggling, or I'm hurting, or I feel lost. And when someone is brave enough to do that, to share that their intimacy, it like, that's when mountains move and magic happens. And I think that's when community is really built instead of this facade. And it's not that those people were unkind or they didn't have good intentions, but I just think that we were given the wrong message of like what we were supposed to be striving for, this idea of perfection, when really like trying to, I really wish that the idea of transformation was the message that we were given.
Wonderful. And I agree with you. It's so refreshing when somebody like just cuts through all the BS.
Yes.
And they're like, hey, listen.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm super happy for you. I'm glad your life is going well. Right now, I'm 5 minutes. I used to say to my mother-in-law, she would like, what are you doing? And I would say, I'm driving to Target to sit in the parking lot. Why are you driving to Target to sit in the parking lot? Because I need to scream, and Target has a large parking lot. And it used to be like my therapy. I would drive to Target, go to the very end of the parking lot, turn my music up super loud, and scream at the top of my head, just scream. And then like giggle at myself because I'm like, so this is how you wind up in a special place, Lisa.
I love it.
And then I would go into Target, do what I need to do, coupon, do all the mommy things, and then get back in my car.
Yep.
Everything was fine. Yep. And she would be like, well, do you want to talk about it? I'm like, yeah, but I feel really good right now. Like, I'll say therapy isn't everywhere. You can dance yourself through therapy. You can
absolutely,
I'm like, you can scream your way through it. Whatever works for you to get you where you need, healthy ways, because
absolutely.
I know that you can, especially through the lens of intimacy with sex addiction, just eating disorders, all the things that come along with the mindset that in order for me to be this perfect person, to be this perfect wife or this perfect spouse, I have to look this way, I have to be this way, I have to speak this way.
Yeah.
And the idea that if, especially when you start bringing family into it. So not only do I have to look, like you said, I have to be perfect here and have all of the answers.
Yep.
If someone else falls apart, I can't fall apart.
Right.
Because I'm perfect. And since I'm perfect and you're falling apart means you're not perfect. So I have to, even though I want to fall apart like you're falling apart, like if we cry together on this floor, I can guarantee you will fix more.
Yeah.
Than if I give you it's going to be fine. I just want you to pray on it.
Yep.
They're like, if you say pray one more time, I'm going to push you. Please don't.
You say this is happening for a reason.
Yes.
God will not give you more than you can handle. Yeah. I know. I've heard it all.
People all the time. I say, don't you dare. If you say that, I am the person who will, I will get in the car. Where are you going? No more.
I'm out of here. Yeah.
Yes, we're done. Yeah. Do you have any tips on ways for us to, I know I asked you 5 tips, but on ways to kind of be intimate with ourselves, to show intimacy to ourselves, because that self-love is so big right now, which it should be all the time, but it's not, which is, we all know that. It's very hard to show your self-love when you don't know what you want your love to look like. Yeah. And I think that sometimes in order to be intimate, you really need to know what it feels like to be intimate with yourself, to trust yourself per se. So like some ways to be able to do that for yourself.
Yeah. One of the things I like to do is encourage people to really increase the sensuality in their life. And again, a lot of times when people hear the word sensuality, they automatically go to sex, like, oh, sensual. And it's like, yeah, so, I mean, yes, that can be a part of it, but like we have become so like disconnected from our senses in modern day society. And because of that, we miss out. And so one of the things I encourage people to do is to really get back in touch with their senses. And that starts to help them develop an intimacy with themselves. So paying attention to things like really to like maybe one day every week, you start, okay, Monday is going to be my smell day. And so you really focus on paying attention to the things that you smell. So when you make that cup of coffee in the morning, really breathe it in, like really focus on, man, just like connecting with that. And then like I remember going for a walk with my husband the other night, and we both were like, man, those flowers smell, I don't even know where they are, but like we literally stopped to try to smell the roses. And that's so counter to how we've been like, gotta go. No, you gotta focus. Like, I don't got time to sit down and smell my coffee, Courtney. I'm too busy like chugging it and putting an IV in my arm with it. Like we're just like focus. And I just like, we miss out on so much of life and so much of what, like you talked about earlier about our intuition trying to communicate with us. Like we can't be intimate with ourselves if we're disconnected from our intuition. And so one way to reconnect with our intuition is through our senses and really starting to honor our mind and our body and getting those back connected together.
I love that. And I will absolutely, I smell
everything.
Good. I'm a smeller. I'm one of those people that like, I smell everything. And yes. I always say it's like honeysuckles remind me of my childhood. It's like a good memory. So, and you don't smell honeysuckles a lot. And because I live in the country, so either you smell cows or horses, or whatever other animal. Right now, I have a deer who lives in my backyard, and he just always stares at me. This is what we do every day with me. I'm like, you've lost the ability to save your life. You can't keep. It doesn't matter what I do. He's like, I'm gonna eat from this tree here, and we're gonna be here together. I'm like, sir. You're supposed to get out of just okay, whatever. Okay, but I love that. But I love just having the idea of taste, smell, touch. Makes such a big difference in, especially learning. That helps you learn the things that you do and don't like.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes, which really helps with intimacy so much, because if you can say, I really love you, but I don't like when you touch me like that, or I don't like this cologne. It does something to me, or,
yes, absolutely. And it's super easy. A lot of times I find like for people to like, oh, I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. I'm like, tell me one thing you do like.
Yes.
No. And then I just say, they got nothing. And so, I mean, it does help to kind of like, okay, so this is kind of the category of things that we're not into. Great. Awesome. But like, giving yourself permission, because I know we talked about that before, like giving yourself permission to be okay with, I not only do I like that, I want that. And then I want to communicate that desire to somebody that's important to me. Like those are big steps. Yeah.
Yes. And I feel like it's one of the best ways to do that is think about the relationship you have with like your best friend. Because I always say, most people, your best friend gets the best of you and sometimes the worst of you. Like like my best friend, when we're together, she's like, what is happening? I'm like, I'm not having a good day, but we're going to have dinner. And by the end, we feel better because like you feel you're somewhere safe. But, I always say, think about how you would want your best friend to feel. So when you are thinking about the things that you like and don't like, most of us could tell each other with our best friend. Even if your best friend's your husband, we could tell what cologne they like, what drink they like, the scents they like. And it's like, okay, so think about yourself. Be your own best friend. What do you like about living? I stopped asking people what's wrong. I always say, what's right with you? Because it stops you, because you have to think about that. Because most of the time you can be like, traffic was horrible, and I came and I split my dress, and so when you're like, what's right with you? You're like, I'm like, well, you woke up today. I mean, I know maybe
Yeah.
it wasn't just your first thing you thought about, but
Right. Yep.
your legs worked, you walked up and down the
Yeah.
steps.
Yeah.
Did you drink coffee? Did you like your coffee today? Was it good? Did you have a good
Mm-hmm.
conversation? What was your playlist like on your phone? Did you listen to the book you liked?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm really big on that. I'm like, start your morning with the thing that makes you the happiest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if it's for mine's, I always say I wake up super early so I can listen to either a book or a seminar or music while
Mm-hmm.
I get like makeup and stuff. I mean, because my children are in their 20s. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to put
Yeah.
anybody to bed. I mean, because if I have
Yeah.
to put you to bed in your 20s, we need to have way more conversation.
That's a serious conversation.
You
Yes.
know, but that's wonderful advice. Just to check in with yourself
Yeah.
and give yourself the grace to change your mind. Because
Mm-hmm.
you could love coffee. It could have been coffee for 10 years, the best
Yep.
coffee you've ever had. And maybe today you woke up and you said, you know what? I think I like tea. I think I want
Yep.
to try tea. And
Yep.
it doesn't mean that you turned on yourself or
Yep.
you turned on your partner. It's just, you're allowed to change because that's what growth looks
Yes.
like.
Absolutely. I love that. Oh, so much. Yes. And even, I remember, so a few years ago, for years and years, I hated running. Like, I just was like, I'm not a runner. I hate it. It's awful. And then my husband would just go up and run. Like, this just set the example, right? He just would go run. He never pressured me. And he just seemed to love it so much. And so I decided one day, it was like, you know what? I'm going to be a runner. I'm going to change my narrative about what running is in my life. And so I like left this identity of like, I'm not a runner. I don't do these things, to choose something different. And I gave myself the permission to do that. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's so big to me to give yourself grace to fail, grace to succeed.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things. It's like, and also grace to say to your friends or people around you, you have to give me permission to change. I'm giving you the grace to be whoever you would like to be. If you know that I'm not a runner and you see me running, now is not the time to say, I thought you hate running. I can't. It's like, I need you to say, oh, good for you. When did you start? I need you to encourage me through this, because doubt is a wonderful friend. It's so doubt and denial. They like sit next to you all day and they're like, today we're going to do this. We're going to run. Well, what about your foot? Well, I thought you said you weren't coordinated. Just all the things that kind of run along with that, which is so beautiful, because I am the person, my husband always said, he said, you're so graceful in heels, and then you put on sneakers and I've seen you trip. And I'm like, yes, but I purchased sneakers and we're going to see how this works out.
Yep.
Like, I'm the person who, when I exercise, I do it barefoot.
Oh,
there's something about either I need to be flat foot or I have to be arched. In sneakers, I like always skid a bit, and I'm like, whatever, you can exercise with your shoes off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can.
I'm like, just move. That's what I'm trying to
absolutely. Yep.
So I would like to know, one, where can we find you and all of your information?
Okay.
And two, how can we help you get your message out?
Oh, okay. So it's pretty straight across all social media is at Courtney Boyer Coaching. So that's LinkedIn, Instagram, all the things.
Sorry, and Courtney with a C, not a K.
Yes, Courtney. Yes, Courtney, Courtney, and then Boyer is Boyer, and then coaching.
Okay.
And then my book you can get at Amazon. You can get it on Apple Books. You can get it at Barnes and Noble, pretty much where anybody sells books. And then, gosh, so one of the things that I really am committed to doing is I love bringing groups of people together and talking about this stuff. And so one of the things that I've been doing since my book came out is being a part of book clubs. So like a book club will read my book for that month or week or whatever it is. And then they'll invite me to come and facilitate a discussion about the book. And I just have been I've just been so amazed, like, at the questions that I get asked and the breakthroughs that people are like, oh, I understand. Okay. Like, this makes sense. And they just give me inspiration, and they inspire each other. And the thing though, that I find so amazing is just like this group of usually already established people have not really been this intimate with each other in terms of these discussions, and just the things that people feel safe for the first time to share because of the book, like that being the medium for them to feel like they have the permission, is just like, I mean, it's incredible. So if you know of anybody who's looking, it can be a group of men. I've done all men's groups, co-ed, all women's groups. It doesn't have to be a book club. It could be like, I've done life groups at church. I've done just like a group of friends that wanted to get together because they all read the book. It's totally free. Like, I don't charge for it because I'm so passionate about being a part of these conversations. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
We're just going to drop that. We're going to have to have a little book club so we can
discuss the book. Yeah.
Yes, because I recently had a podcast with a gentleman, and we were just talking about relationships and ending long-term relationships, and, learning how to really dig into your bags, the garbage that you have carried with you for so long, learning how to open up and be honest.
Yeah.
And I feel like there are a lot of people in the world, men included, because they are people. And I know we tried it. The world tells you shouldn't look at it like that, but where they have so many emotions and they have such a ancient idea of what sex is, intimacy is, that they have so many ideas put on them about what they're supposed to do and what makes them a man, and how, and it's amazing to me that how many men have best friends and groups of men, and they never talk about life. They just stay so surface level because they're told that if they go any deeper, somehow now you're no longer masculine, which but they're also supposed to be able to not have those conversations with people that they trust, and then date and somehow miraculously know how to have those conversations, So I think that conversations around intimacy makes such a big difference because it teaches you how to be intimate mentally before you're physically there. And it also teaches you how to be intimate with yourself so that you have that grace to be able to hear people and not have the judgment, prelude the conversation. Sometimes that's what happens with a lot of us. We're like, I would never think like that. I would never. It's like, okay, but we are. So,
right. Yep.
So I thank you so much. And I appreciate you talking to us about this. I hope to talk to you again.
Yes, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Because I definitely would like to, after reading the book, just kind of go in and hit some topics. I know that I have friends who, and all of us, we have these conversations about intimacy and, what it feels like to, like, all of us, my best friend, and it stuck with me. I'm going to get a t-shirt that says it. She said, you're lucky if you have 40 summers left. What are you going to do with your 40 summers? And I was like, when you say it like that, so that was an intimate statement. Like, hey, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? How are we going to live our lives? Are we going to be sad? Are we going to trauma dump for the next 40 years? So having conversations like this, and being able to talk to you, Courtney, it just warms my heart. I thank you so much for this.
Oh, thank you. You're amazing. I've had the best time. This is like, you're great. So thank you for letting me be a part of your world.
Thank you. And we will definitely be in touch with each other.
Yeah, sounds great.
Thank you. You have okay, guys, really, Courtney's in Germany. Let's talk about how technology has made this possible.
I know, it's amazing.
And I was like, it's 8 o'clock?
8:30 now. Yeah.
Where she is. So I thank you so much for giving me your time and stepping away from your family.
No problem.
And I hope to talk to you again in the future.
Yes. Thank you. I would love that.
Courtney.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you found some healing, connection, and joy. Until next time, bye, loves.